Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Hello and welcome to my dear students and friends to the Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University Ahmedabad in Chaitanya studio of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University Ahmedabad in a video lecture series for the course called BBA program regular, in that the subject called Management Accounting, block number 3, unit number 1, Working Capital Management, part 1. Before we start today's session, for that, let's examine what are that learning objectives for the working capital management. In that, my dear friends, you have to evaluate and the main object, that is meaning of working capital management, then significance of working capital management. With respect to this, let us start our session to defining the introduction part of working capital. The working capital management is a management methodology where the company manages the relationship amongst the assets and the liabilities for a short duration. It is a way by which the company manages its money for day-to-day operations and the immediate debt obligations. In case of managing the working capital, company needs to take care of the accounts receivable, accounts payable, inventories, along with the cash. The idea behind the working capital management is to have required cash flow for definite and regular operation with utmost productive usage of resources. There appear certain calculations in regard to working capital management where there are the probability of calculating working capital by, we can say, the considering the current assets and thereby reducing the current liabilities. The working capital efficiency is determined by calculating the working capital ratio. This ratio is a key indicator in a company's financial health. The working capital efficiency is calculated by considering the current asset which is divided by current liability. So in working capital, the current assets and current liability play an important role while you calculating the working capital management, or you may calculate the working capital ratio. When the result of calculation is less than 1, or we can say 1.0, then it is taken as a sign that the company is having the financial issues. While when the result is more than 1.0 or 1 but less than 2.0 or 2, in such case the company results in a good financial health. If the calculation resulting to the above 2 or 2.0, then result shows that the desired company will not be possible to make effective use of assets. So if you want to take a decision on a working capital ratio, then you have to evaluate it with the working capital ratio, and the ratio will be in the measurement or average of the 1.0 to 2.0. Now let us examine the definition. Working capital is a measure of a company's efficiency and short-term financial health. It refers to that part of the company's capital which is required for the financing short-term or current assets such as a cash, marketable security, debtors, inventories. It is a company's surplus of current assets over the current liabilities, which measures the extent to which it can finance any increase in turnover from other fund resources. Funds thus invested in a current assets keep revolving and are constantly converted into the cash, and this cash flow is again used in an exchange of further, or we can say the other current assets. Working capital can be categorized on the basis of the concept of the gross working capital and the net working capital on the basis of period, or we can say the time. The two major component of working capitals are, there is a current assets and current liabilities. On the major aspects of an effective working capital management are to have the regular analysis of the company's current assets and current liabilities. On that basis, my dear friends, we examine the working capital management and we determine that the working capital management cycle over there. In that, the marketable investment converted into cash, cash to inventory, and inventory to receivables, and receivables again go to the marketable investment. So this is what, my dear friend, the whole working capital cycle over there. So after defining the definition, after reaching the introduction point or introduction part of the working capital management, we define that working capital management cycle over there. The cycle prescribed the four components are there, that is a marketable investment, then cash to inventories, inventories to receivables, and receivables to again to the marketable investments. So this is, my dear friends, the working capital management cycle. The next point is to defining, or we can say the discussing the nature and concept of working capital management. The working capital management relates to strategies which are carried by the companies so as to handle the short-term mitigations like certain assets and liability, with an idea to make sure that it result as a continuous operation for clearing of the debt obligation. It will administer the current assets and current liabilities. A good management of working capital involves, or we can say evolves, the main part of all corporate strategies by involving the prices, or we can say the policies of the different companies in relation to profitability, liquidity, and the structure of a particular organization. After that, let us examine the different kinds of the natures of a working capital management. The nature of working capital relates to purchase of raw materials, payment of wages and expenses. It change from in order to keep moving the business, enhance the liquidity, solvency, creditworthiness, and the image of the enterprise. Then generation of cost elements like material, wages, expenses, etc. Then allowing the enterprises to avail the cash discounts, facilities offered by the suppliers, etc. Then improvement of the moral of executives and efficiency. Then expansion of programs of an enterprise in maintaining the operations, or we can say the operational efficiency of the fixed assets. So these are the nature of working capital. After that, let us examine the concept of working capital, or we can say the concept relating to the working capital. It involves the two concepts are there, that is a gross working capital and another is a net working capital. As per the gross concept, the working capital involves the current assets along with the amount of funds which is invested in a current assets. It involves the capital invested in a current assets that gets converted into the cash within the short time period, or we can say the short period. On that basis, the gross working capital is equal to nothing but your total current assets over there. So the gross working capital is company's investment in a current assets, which shows total of current assets including cash in hand, cash at bank, inventories, prepaid expense, bills receivables, etc. In this, the amount invested in a current assets is a working capital that is needed to run day-to-day operations, and these are the current assets of the company that changed from one form to another, either from the cash to inventory or from inventory to work in progress. So here the changes in a component of cost like raw material, wages and expenses, these are ultimately the part of what, my dear friend, the gross working capital over there. On that basis, we can also defining the another concept, that is a net working capital. The net concept of working capital involves the extra current assets over the current liabilities. But the differences or the difference among the current asset and the current liability is nothing but, my dear friend, your net working capital. On that basis, the mathematical expectations are that is a net working capital is equal to current assets minus current liability. In a simple way, we can say that the difference between current assets and current liability is nothing but what? Your net working capital. And this concept is known as a net concept. In a gross concept, the gross working capital is equal to your total current assets over there. And here, while we're defining the net working capital, that is difference between current assets and current liabilities. With this, the net working capital relates to the difference between your current assets and current liability. And although investing in a good long run, or we can say the long-term capital project, receives the more emphasis than day-to-day work associated with the managing the working capital. Companies that do not handle this financial aspect well will not attract the capital necessary to fund those highly visible ventures. In other words, we can say that you must get through the short run to get a long run. That means if you want to go to the long, you have to manage the short things. So this is what, my dear friend, that is the concept of the working capital with respect to the net concept. After watching this particular session, you have to evaluate yourself, my dear friends. Now the question is, sir, how we evaluate ourselves? By watching this particular video? Yes, my dear friends, you can evaluate it. Now the question is how. So you have to evaluate yourself with the three aspects. That is a long-term, solving the long-term questions or long questions, then short questions, and then for the multiple choice question. And after that, if you want to study more and more with respect to this subject or this particular unit, you have to refer the different types of books. So let us examine the first aspect, that is a long question. You have to evaluate the first question, that is describe the nature of working capital, and second is the concept of working capital. In that, my dear friend, you have to define the firstly the introduction part, then definition, then the nature of working capital, and in a concept that you have to define the gross concept as well as the net concept over it. The next concept, or we can say the evaluation process with respect to this, that is a short question. The first question is what is gross working capital, and second question is define the net working capital management. After that, solving the multiple choice question. The first question is working capital management is a methodology used by the company to handle first management issues, salary issues, relationship among the assets and liability for a short duration, and all of the above. The answer is relationship among the assets and liability for a short duration. The second question is which capital measures the company's efficiency and short-term financial health? Equity share capital, preferential capital, working capital, or none of the above. So answer is working capital is measure the company's efficiency and the short-term financial health. So this is, my dear friend, the multiple choice question over there. After that, solving this multiple choice question, you want to study more and more with respect to this topic, then you may refer this book. It is a very good book for you, that you referring this book for a working capital management as well as the financial terms, or we can say the management accounting aspects also. So in this session we learn that the introduction portion of working capital, then the different types of the definition with respect to working capital, then the nature of working capital, and then the concept of working capital. In that, the concept are determined by the two ways, that is a gross concept and the net concept. The gross concept is nothing but you're defining the total current assets, and the net concept is the difference between your current assets and current liability. So this is what we learn in a working capital management in today's session. So this is all about today's session. Hope you enjoy this study. Thank you very much, my dear friends. Hope you learn well in this way. Thank you very much.
स्वाध्यायः परमं तप